BMing, kiting, bridge spam, or 3-card cycle. These are all terms only Clash Royale players actually know the meaning of, and if you're a player yourself and you don't, then this video is for you, because we're going to be breaking down every term used in the Clash Royale world and getting you up to speed, starting with BM. BM is short for bad manners and refers to disrespectful or unsportsmanlike behavior, most commonly done by spamming toxic emotes. It's part of the Clash Royale culture and is often used when the player against you or even yourself emotes right after taking your first tower or before the game ends as a way to taunt your opponent and celebrate early. BM usually happens through emotes like the annoying laugh or the sarcastic cry, or even through the chat emotes like thanks when your opponent does a mistake, or good game right when the game starts, as a way to tell your opponent that you've already won the match before it even started. Now, BMing your opponent will most of the times get them tilted, which is the second term we'll be explaining. If you've ever lost 3 matches in a row, or your opponent BMs you and you start placing random troops left and right to try and win, and thought to yourself, I hate this game, well, congratulations, you've been tilted. You often hear it with streamers. Tilted simply means a player is emotionally frustrated, leading to poor decision making and a significant drop in gameplay performance. Meta. The meta is short for most effective tactics available. It basically means whatever is popular and powerful right now, based on the recent updates and balance changes. When you hear someone say that that's meta, they mean that's what people are using to win at the highest level. When everyone is running Hog 2.6, that's the meta. When everyone runs fast cycle decks or bait decks, that's the meta. And it constantly changes based on live updates, nerfs, or buffs. Meta slave. A meta slave is a player who religiously copies whatever deck sits at the top of the leaderboard or the latest best deck in Clash Royale and never changes. Being a meta slave isn't necessarily bad. After all, the meta exists because those decks work. They're efficient, proven, and statistically strong. So for players just trying to climb the ladder, following the meta is a solid move. But the community usually labels those players as meta slaves because they only play the meta deck because it's powerful without learning why it's strong. And when the meta shifts, which it always does when new balance changes and updates drop, they suddenly find themselves lost. Ladder. The ladder refers to the game's primary progression and ranking system, meaning trophies. You have low ladder, mid ladder, and top ladder, each representing different skill and trophy ranges. So when you hear someone say that's typical mid ladder play, most likely when they drop a Mega Knight, you know that they're talking about their skill level and trophy range. OP. OP is a general gaming term which means overpowered. That term is used when a card is generally way stronger than others, and it gives a very significant advantage to the player with very minimal weaknesses. Think of cards like the release day Night Witch that spawned endless bats and was a high advantage every time it was played, destroying cards for just 4 elixir. Buffs and nerfs. A buff means an update to an existing card, making it slightly more powerful. Maybe they increase its damage, lower its cost, or make it attack faster. Buffs usually make minor changes to cards, but in some cases, buffs can turn normal, sometimes forgotten cards into the new meta. Take the Royal Giant for example. Released in 2016, it was never really used as it cost way too much, did little damage, and was easy to counter. But a slight 20% increase in damage turned the Royal Giant from a forgotten card to the center of many meta decks throughout the next seasons. Nerf is the opposite. A nerf happens when Supercell or the community decides that a card is too strong and needs to be slightly weaker. Lower damage, slower attack speed, reduced range, or even reduced movement speed. Miner was once the most OP card of all time. You can place it anywhere on the map and deal great damage, but after many nerfs, its damage was reduced to minor chip damage. It still is a major card in many cycle or control decks, but deals way less damage than it used to. Moving on, we have many key gameplay terms you should know if you plan on becoming a better Clash Royale player. Starting off with kiting. At its core, kiting means using your troops or buildings to pull away an enemy unit off its natural path, usually away from your crown tower, so you can neutralize it with minimal damage and maximum value for elixir. Imagine dropping an ice golem in the center just in time to drag a P.E.K.K.A. across the bridge, forcing him to chase it down while both your towers chip him down. That's a kite. Kiting is a skill every player should learn, because doing it right means the ability to defend a 10 elixir push with only 3 elixir from your side. Knowing when and where to place your troop makes all the difference. Kiting usually is best done with troops that target towers directly, as this troop will pull your opponent's attack all the way through the second lane, completely destroying it, and if you manage to kite without the troop receiving any damage, it serves as a great counter push start. Now, a counter push is something that happens when you defend an incoming attack while still keeping 1 or 2 troops alive, and immediately turn that leftover defense into an offensive push. It's one of the most elegant and resource smart plays in the entire game. Elixir leaking. Elixir leaking happens when your elixir bar hits 10 and you don't play anything, meaning you stop generating more, thus leaking potential elixir you could have gained to use on troops. Every second you sit at max elixir, your opponent could be spending theirs, building momentum and effectively earning earning a lead without doing a thing. So when you see yourself at 10 elixir, don't sit on them. Play any card. Cycle a card to get your win condition or gain value from a spell. Win condition. Every Clash Royale deck, no matter how complicated it looks, revolves around one simple question. How do I actually win? The answer is your primary source of tower damage, and it's called your win condition. In simple terms, it's the card you rely on to deal the most amount of damage and get you the win. Cards like Hog, Balloon, Golem, or Royal Giant are all win conditions. These cards will get you the win, and your whole deck is built around supporting them and get them deployed as safely and often as much as possible to deal the most damage. And no, the Mega Knight is not a win condition. Swarm. A Swarm card is usually a card that comes in groups, usually with low health but high damage output if used right. Think of Skeleton Army, Goblins, Minion Horde, or Bats. Swarm cards usually shine on defense. Against big tank units like P.E.K.K.A. or Giant, they're some of the most efficient answers in the game. But all it takes is one log, a fireball, or arrows, and your swarm disappears. This is why bait decks usually contain more than one swarm card, in order to bait these spells out of your opponent's hand and then freely playing your second swarm without your opponent having anything to defend it. Splash. In Clash Royale, splash damage, sometimes called area damage or AoE, is any attack that hits multiple troops all at once. Think of the Witch, the Wizard, or Baby Dragon. The Pocket. This term usually comes in the phrase you've probably heard before, the sneaky golem in the pocket. The sneaky golem in the pocket meme was started by YouTuber Sweaty Clash in May 2025 and later became a whole trend on TikTok. It simply means saving your golem until the end of the match and then playing it as a surprise on your opponent's side of the arena after taking their tower. This area specifically is referred to as the pocket. It's the area created after you take your opponent's crown tower. Now of course, it's not limited to the golem. You can play anything in this area and it will still be called the pocket. Outcycle. To outcycle someone means to play through your cards faster than they get back to theirs, especially their counter to your win condition. Let's say you're playing Hog Rider and your opponent's only reliable counter is Cannon. If your deck cycles faster, you can drop your Hog twice before they draw Cannon again. The first push baits out the defense and the second one hits the tower. This is outcycling. It's not just about playing cards fast. It's also knowing how many cards your opponent played after their counter. If you just try to outcycle someone that is also trying to outcycle you, you'll just run into the same problem over and over again. So it's all about reading your opponent's deck, what card he's playing, and what cards is available for him to play, then acting accordingly. Decks like Hawk 2.6, Expo decks, or minor wall breakers all rely on playing your cards faster, so your opponent doesn't have his counter card in hand, and you just take free damage to the tower, eventually winning the game. To outcycle your opponent effectively, you have to understand another very important term, which is the 4-card cycle. You see, Clash Royale doesn't randomly draw your cards. It uses a fixed 4-card hand system, meaning when you play one card, the next card in your deck immediately slides into your hand. But here is the key mechanic. Once you play a card, it takes 4 more cards to cycle back to it. Understanding this means being able to predict what cards your opponent has in his hand or what he's about to play. If your opponent drops a Hog Rider, you can mentally count after your opponent plays 4 cards and know that the Hog Rider is back in his hand and will be played soon. Top players track this instinctively in order to know when the opponent's win condition is coming back and prepare their counter. And this also works both ways. Suppose your opponent uses log to clear your goblin gang, you know that log won't reappear until they've played 4 more cards. That gives you a short window to drop skeleton army or goblin barrel without fear, unless this happens. Elixir trade. An elixir trade is simply the difference between what you spend and what your opponent spends in any interaction. If you spend 3 elixir to counter something that cost them 5, then you just made a positive elixir trade. You're now up 2 elixir of your opponent and can use that towards your push. Spell value. Spell value measures how much you get out of a single spell, meaning how many troops you hit, how much tower damage you deal, and whether you gain an elixir advantage from the exchange. Dropping a fireball on a musketeer, a wizard, and hitting the tower at the same time is a huge value. You've essentially traded 4 elixir for 9 plus tower damage, and over the course of the game, this will give you a huge advantage. Chip damage. Not every Clash Royale victory ends with a massive push flattening a tower. Sometimes you win by nicking it to death one hit at a time. This is chip damage. It means dealing small, repeated bits of damage to a tower over time. Not with one huge swing, but with consistency. It is slow, but compounds over the course of the game, eventually resulting in a tower down. Decks that rely on chip damage are also built with defense first in mind, meaning your whole deck is built to defend any incoming push while slowly chipping away at your opponent's tower. Decks like Minor Poison, Expo Cycle, or even Hawk 2.6 can be considered a chip damage deck. The Hawk isn't supposed to take the whole tower in one push. It's supposed to get 1 or 2 hits every 20 seconds. That's all it needs to eventually take down the whole tower and get you the win. Hard counter. Sometimes in Clash Royale, you don't lose because you played badly, you lose because your opponent had the exact cards needed that perfectly counters yours, and that's just down to matchmaking. A hard counter is a card or sometimes an entire deck that naturally shuts down another card or strategy with almost no effort and zero tower damage. It's not about skill or reaction time, it's about design. One side simply has the built-in advantage. A log always deletes a skeleton army with positive elixir trade. An Inferno Tower always melts a Royal Giant or a Mega Knight. But a soft counter, however, is a card that defends well with minimal tower damage. Think of a Knight versus a Mega Knight. If placed well, a Knight can defend cleanly, but in some cases, the Mega Knight survives, however with very minimal tower damage. And now we get to the most important terms that you absolutely need to know. These are the different deck types, starting off with the bait deck. A bait deck is built around one central idea, forcing your opponent to waste their counter so your real threat can strike. The concept first took off in 2016 when early players realized something powerful. Everyone had limited answers to Swarm. Cards like Log, Zap, and Arrows could erase small troops instantly, but once those are gone, the board was wide open. So clever players started running multiple cards that all demanded the same response, and that's how the classic log bait deck was born. It used Goblin Barrel, the Princess, and Goblin Gang, all forcing your opponent to use their log. Streamers like Surgical Goblin and Oxalate made it famous in tournaments and ladder play. If they log your Princess, your Goblin Barrel is already flying. But as powerful as this deck sounds, it's also very easy to counter if you go against a player running double spells or even Valkyrie. Moving on, we have Bridge Spam deck. Bridge spam decks don't rely on building slow pushes or baiting cards. Their entire philosophy is constant pressure. The term bridge spam comes from exactly what it sounds like, spamming units right at the bridge, but most importantly, spamming cards that move fast and demand an instant answer, like the Bandit, the Battle Ram, the Dark Prince, Royal Ghost, and even Ram Rider. This forces your opponent to spend Elixir to defend quickly or lose their tower, keeping the pressure on and not allowing them to build a strong push against you. One of the most famous bridge spam deck is the P.E.K.K.A. Bandit Ewis, using the P.E.K.K.A., the Bandit, the Electro Wizard, Battle Ram, Royal Ghost, and 2 spells. Next, we have control decks. A control deck focuses on defending efficiently, then counter pushing with the surviving troops, or using chip damage troops to slowly bring down the tower. A control player doesn't play first, they respond. They wait for their opponent to make a move, then counter it cleanly for a positive elixir trade. From there, they transition instantly into a counter push, using the same troops to apply pressure on the other side of the board. Decks like Minor Poison, Graveyard Control, or Ice Bow all rely on defense first, then counter pushing to chip away damage at the tower. A beatdown deck, however, is the exact opposite. Beatdown is the oldest and most iconic archetype in Clash Royale, the art of building one unstoppable push that steamrolls everything in its path. It's not about outcycling or baiting spells, it's about creating a push so big that your opponent simply can't stop it. A beatdown deck mainly revolves around tanks. These are slow, high health units like Golem, Giant, Lava Hound, or Electro Giant with support troops behind it. Once your tank starts walking down the lane, you drop your support behind it, like Baby Dragon, Night Witch, or Electro Dragon. And if your opponent doesn't have the perfect defense lined up, their tower's gone. There's no fancy predictions, no 200 IQ plays, just raw strategic power. Beatdown decks have defined early Clash Royale and are still major headaches for players today. One of the oldest community jokes is, when in doubt, Golem in the back. And finally, we reach siege decks, which is also the exact opposite of beatdown decks. In Clash Royale, a siege deck wins not by crossing the bridge, but by defending it and attacking from far away. It's the only archetype where your win condition never even has to get close to the enemy tower. It just locks on from afar and does the work for you. Cards like Expo and Mortar define the siege archetype, but make no mistake, siege decks are not easy to play. It's probably the most mentally demanding playstyle in Clash Royale, and if you're not ready for your opponent's counters, you could go the entire game without your Expo locking onto the tower even once. One of the most iconic siege decks is the Expo Siege, or also known as Icebo. You cycle cheap cards like Skeletons, Ice Spirit, and Archers. You use your Tesla to defend your Expo and aim at clearing the arena to allow your Expo to lock onto the tower. And now, you effectively know every term you need to know in Clash Royale. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you learned something today, make sure to drop a comment and subscribe for more.